Guild Receptionist with secret S-rank powers solos bosses to avoid overtime. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. After a good night's sleep, a young girl wakes up and opens her window to take in the beautiful morning view. In a cheerful mood, she greets the balcony cat and puts on her work uniform, ready to give her best as always. As the receptionist at a guild called Cheerful Counter, she loves her office job for its security and stability as a public service. Plus, she gets to wear a pretty uniform and guide adventurers with all her charm. She processes the paperwork gradually, and when it's time to go home, she leaves peacefully. In other words, it's the perfect job. At least, that's what she'd hoped for. In reality, this employee has been doing overtime the most peculiar way. In a dungeon, faced with the adventurer's struggle against a boss, she showed up at the last minute with her giant hammer to handle the situation. Today, things were going normally at the guild, with the employees serving adventurers in the order they arrived. Then it was the turn of a man named Gans of the Fierce Blade, one of the local stars. He approached the counter and announced that he would face the boss of the underground ruins of Belfla, the infernal flame dragon. Noting that people around were commenting that this dungeon had been stuck for a long time, Gans emphasized that many there seemed to believe in his victory, since this labyrinth required the help of the Silver Sword organization to conquer. Internally, the receptionist reflected that it was precisely these guys who were taking their time. Playing it cool, she informed him that since he would accept the mission in a group, she needed to verify his second-class license. Offended, Gans flashed his badge, claiming to be a member of the Silver Sword, the strongest group in the guild, and that a receptionist like her shouldn't need a license to recognize a hero when she sees one. Frustrated internally, the poor woman pondered that she obviously knew this big guy because she dealt with absolutely all of them day after day, but she could not assign missions to anyone who didn't present the license, period. After venting in her mind, she admitted that she recognized the gentleman, but to ensure that his life was not in danger on the mission, she needed to confirm that he was strong enough to venture into this dungeon. Since that was the case, Gans took off his helmet and introduced himself sarcastically, while the clerk asked for the license once more, now with less patience. Thus, he threw the towel and showed his card, ending the service. After he left, she saw that the line was huge and never going to end. The guild employee lives in the city of Ifil. Long ago, on the continent of Helcatia, the ancestors received blessings from gods known as Dyaus and used them to build an advanced civilization. However, all the ancestors disappeared without explanation, and with their absence, monsters spread across the continent and made the place quite dangerous. 200 years ago, some people began to explore the dungeons of the continent, driving away the monsters and building cities along the way. These people became known as adventurers, and of all the guild offices dealing with these people, the Cheerful Counter is the largest of all. When night falls in Cheerful, adventurers gather to drink, celebrate, and talk about their missions, while the receptionist stays at work to finish accounting and reports. Exhausted, she lays her head on the desk and grumbles that she just wanted to go home to take a bath, make some light food, and read a book. Thinking about it, she considers leaving the rest of the work for tomorrow, but remembers it will only pile up, so she decides to do what she can now, so tomorrow she can leave on time and have peace at home. To stay focused, she ingests a substance of dubious origin. The damned infernal flame dragon, the boss of the Belfla ruins, is to blame because no one can defeat this boss, so the monsters continue to reappear non-stop. With this, the adventurers will continue to accept this mission until the boss is defeated, and the employee needs to deal with this endless crowd day after day. Night after night, she continues at the counter resolving issues. Filled with anger because of that damn dragon, it's been a month since the receptionist has been in this insane work rhythm and she can't take it anymore. The only way for her to have peace and quiet is when someone finally defeats that beast. Speaking of the trouble on the last floor of the Belfla ruins, the Silver Sword group faced the infernal flame dragon with great difficulty. The tank activates his Sigurth Wall ability to protect his companions from the beast's fire. Gans, who is not a target of the blast, hits the dragon with his axe, but the blow barely tickles the monster, which swats the warrior against the wall. Immediately, Luli starts a healing spell to save her companion, while Lo summons the Ember spell, which consists of several ice spears thrown at the enemy, which once again remains unscathed. Faced with the situation, the team leader, the tank, considers retreating, as it is clear that they stand no chance. However, at that moment, a hooded figure appears and summons a gigantic weapon through an ability. Filled with hatred because of this creature that doesn't let her rest, the guild employee jumps over the dragon's flames and strikes hard with her hammer on the beast's skull, making it reel for the first time in the fight. The monster tries to crush the girl with its paw, but she agilely dodges and hits the target once more, making it clear that she no longer wants to do overtime. The hammer blow causes the dragon to fall to the ground, and the fall causes a large crack in its armor. Feeling threatened, it flies and spits fire once more, but the receptionist isn't playing around today. After escaping the flames, she leaps again and uses the sharp part of her hammer to drive into the beast's scale, causing a tremendous tear in its chest. After suffering such a blow, the infernal flame dragon falls. Watching this unexpected scene, the leader of the Silver Sword wonders if he is in the presence of the executioner himself, a mysterious adventurer who single-handedly defeats the dungeon bosses that no one else can conquer. After the boss's item drops, the iful counter receptionist thinks she might finally be able to leave work on time tomorrow. However, not everything went as expected during that little visit to the Belfla ruins. The next day, when she arrives at the guild, the receptionist reads a flyer featuring a photo of the hooded adventurer. The Silver Sword group is seeking this individual to replace Gans of the Fierce Blade, who is retiring. In the midst of this, Layla, a coworker, calls over to Alina and asks if she knows who the formidable executioner is. Alina pretends to be clueless, so her friend explains that the executioner appears out of nowhere to rescue adventurers in danger and then leaves without even giving his name. Layla knows that Mr. Jade is quite popular, but truthfully, she finds the executioner much cooler and thinks if this guy joins the Silver Sword, the group will be unbeatable. However, Alina wants nothing to do with this mess, because if they catch her soloing bosses with a forged license, she'll be out on the street losing her job stability, safe life, and benefits, not to mention having to always come back on time unless there's overtime. For these reasons, the receptionist can't even think about letting others ruin this for her. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild headquarters, the leader of the Silver Sword tries to figure out who the executioner is. Although he suspects it's a girl, Lululi and Lo find this unlikely due to the size of the weapon the individual was carrying. Regardless, the tank is sure the executioner is a black-haired, green-eyed girl. Even though his companions pressure him to find a replacement attacker as soon as possible, the leader asks for a bit more time to find this mysterious person. After the meeting, the wizard and the healer go to buy some famous donuts from a bakery. Lululi also wants to buy herbs, but the boy just wants to go back to the inn for a nap, so she scolds him for never wanting to enjoy life. Lo argues that he takes his work seriously and stays up nights studying grimoires, but the girl doesn't care and continues looking at other products in the street market. In the meantime, in Dark Alley, a man is furious because everyone thinks they can fool him until a figure with a skeleton mask appears before him. Meanwhile, the leader of the Silver Sword analyzes a relic in his hand. Relics are objects that contain the mark of the dais and store techniques from the ancestors. Every adventurer dreams of having one of these in hand, but the executioner simply ignored this item when defeating the infernal flame dragon. In fact, her technique looked nothing like Sigurth, which he uses. Actually, it seems like a Daya ability, and this motivates him even more to find this mysterious person. Suddenly, the wind blows strong and directs his gaze to a girl who, when she turns her face, looks exactly like the executioner. Thus, he discovers that she is the guild receptionist because of her uniform and because she entered the iful counter. Speaking of her, Alina is glad that it's slow today so she can just veg out in peace. However, the guy looking for her goes straight to her counter, and the girl gets scared when she sees the leader of the Silver Sword in front of her, thinking he's searching for the executioner. By the way, he mentions that he's looking for a warrior who appeared in the Belfla ruins with a huge warhammer, so Alina replies that she knows nothing about it and pretends to go check with her colleagues in the back, but the man says that he clearly remembered the face of that warrior, who had black hair and green eyes. Having said that, he mentions Alina Clover's name, asserting it was her. When he expresses surprise that the executioner works as a receptionist, Alina sees her stable job slipping away, but determined not to give it up, she invites the guy to talk somewhere else. In an alley, he offers the reward she herself earned by defeating the dragon. When she takes the relic, the girl comments that these artifacts have unbelievable resilience, but just as the man was about to agree, she breaks the item with one hand and explains that she wants to lead a quiet life as a receptionist. And if this nutcase does something against that, he will pay dearly. In other words, if he doesn't want to end up like the dragon from that dungeon, it's best he never show up in front of her again. Having said that, Alina turns to leave, but the boy grabs her arm and activates the Sigurth wall on her, hardening the woman's body and preventing her escape. Not to let it slide, Clover summons her hammer and nearly crushes the adventurer, who escaped death at the last moment. Before he receives a second blow, he asks desperately if that hammer is a Daya ability, but the woman has no idea what that is. He explains that they are legendary techniques believed to have disappeared with the ancestors, and that they are even stronger than the Sigurth, which are the most powerful known to society. Putting that aside, he confesses that he didn't come to fight, but to have Alina Clover. The woman frowns even more and threatens to sue the guy for harassment, so he explains that he wants to recruit her for the Silver Sword, and if she only wants to be a receptionist, there's no reason for her to have soloed the dungeon boss. About that, she reveals that she just didn't want to do overtime because nothing compares to the despair of having a mountain of work piled up and even more coming your way. The hard truth is that Alina does overtime to organize tasks and avoid having to do overtime, but it's a crappy snowball that never ends because adventurers are lazy incompetents who can't do their job and end up overloading those who operate behind the scenes, and that's why she had to find a way to reclaim her peace. But now there's a fool bothering her and wanting to reveal her identity. Having said that, she makes it clear for the last time that she will not join any group and warns the citizen he will regret it if he snoops around claiming she is the executioner. Back at work, Alina reflects that she just wants to return home on time and live in peace, until the troubled man from the alley comes in and yells at Layla, telling her to pass him a secret mission. That means more overtime for Clover. Having already explained the situation, Layla begins to cry. Alina steps closer to protect her friend and reiterate that their guild does not deal with secret missions. The man is uninterested in this explanation, convinced they are hiding something, and even mocks Alina, calling her a snooty little receptionist. Internally, Alina curses him out, frustrated by the persistent rumors of secret missions that don't actually exist. Externally, she calmly explains that she only handles publicly announced missions, which only infuriates the adventurer further. At this point, all Alina wants to do is punch him in the face, but the situation is far from improving. The man, not satisfied, grabs her blouse and demands if this is how to treat a customer. That's when the leader of the sword steps in, grabs the man's arm, and tells Slay to cut the nonsense. Slay thinks the man is just showing off to impress the girl and attempts to punch him, but the defender manages to turn the tables and subdue the attacker. He warns that if Slay touches the receptionist again, he will pay, causing the brute to flee, vowing revenge. Layla thanks her friend for her help, while the leader of the guild's strongest group checks if the employee is okay, cautioning her not to provoke the dangerous types that show up there. Though she was provoked, Alina apologizes and promises to be more cautious in the future. She then asks the customer what brings him there today, to which he vaguely replies that he was just passing by before sheepishly departing. The next morning, Alina wakes up and remembers that the leader of the Silver Sword has discovered her true identity. Reflecting on this, she thinks she should have broken some of the brute's bones to ensure his silence. But considering he's the most important member of the city's main team, she would certainly be fired if she did. Honestly, all she wants is to stay home and stare at the ceiling because of the whole situation, but one thing must be considered. She only managed to finance her house because she has a steady job as the guild's receptionist. Remembering this, she gets out of bed with renewed energy, reminding herself that she has the best job there is and no one is going to fire her over trivialities. Later, while eating a sandwich on a park bench, she wonders about that guy who seems to be on her case all the time. Just then, the very man she was thinking of arrives, acting all nonchalant, commenting on how nice and peaceful the little spot is. Without a second thought, Alina summons her hammer, as her lunch break is her only time of peace. To defuse the situation, the young man asks when she awakened her Dia ability, but the girl refuses to share. He remarks that everyone thinks it's a matter of luck, since no one really knows how it happens. Therefore, he believes Alina is wasting her talent in her current job. With that, the girl reaffirms that she will never join the Silver Sword and starts walking away, wondering why the gods had to give such power to a mere receptionist. As she walks back to the company, observing the entire city, she remembers the summer from 2 years ago. The annual Centennial Festival of Ifo lasted 3 days and 3 nights as always. But since Alina had just been hired as a receptionist, she wasn't used to the workload and was doing overtime every day. Obviously, all she wanted was to enjoy the festival that was happening, but she was stuck at work. According to legend, the person with the most intense desire during the Centennial Festival receives the blessing of the Dais. With that in mind, Alina wished never to do overtime again, but when she realized that nothing had changed, she continued her work. Hours later, she finally finishes her overtime, then rushes to enjoy the event, but it had already ended. In tears, she wonders why she couldn't enjoy the festival after all her hard efforts. That day, she felt immense remorse for the adventurers who don't defeat the bosses and cause her extra work. Thinking about it, the receptionist would do anything to get rid of the overtime, and her anger makes her wish she had the power to just blow everything away. At that moment, a magical circle appeared on the ground beneath her. Returning to the present day, Slay sits on a bench in the street and vows not to rest until he teaches that wretched receptionist a lesson. At the same time, he watches as the carcass of a dungeon boss is carted away on a wagon. Nearby, the leader of the Silver Sword wonders what he must do for Alina to notice him, or rather, to get her to join the group. Suddenly, he hears thunderous footsteps nearby, so he rushes to see what it is. It turns out to be Slay, who somehow managed to revive the boss and make it punch the central square's crystal. When he arrives, the leader of the Silver Sword uses his Haster ability to provoke the monster's attacks and allow others to flee. However, other adventurers explain that this is a boss and that it's impossible to face it alone. An adventurer explains that they put the monster to sleep to extract materials from it, but it woke up suddenly. In the midst of this, Slay bursts into laughter, taunts the silver sword, and boasts that he's controlling the giant, declaring that he'll destroy the entire city and take the receptionist down with him. With that, he uses the giant's mortal stomp, but the tank responds with the Sigarth wall to block the attack. Meanwhile, to the surprise of no one, Alina Clover is doing overtime and grumbling to the four winds until she hears the noise from the square. She steps out onto the balcony to see what's going on and realizes it's that lubmouth Slay controlling the giant. Amidst this, the monster throws a stone heading in a direction Alina cannot allow it to fall, so she runs to prevent a tragedy. However, just as she arrives at the spot where the rock landed, the poor girl sees her humble home destroyed along with all the financing she would have taken 30 years to pay off, all washed away. The feeling of this tragedy brings an infinite hatred for the cause of it all. And then the receptionist conjures her hammer to confront the troublesome complainer decisively. Meanwhile, Slay challenges the adventurers to keep up the offensive, but most who dared to attack were defeated. Suddenly, Alina arrives disguised as the executioner and shatters the arm of the stone giant, capturing the attention of everyone in the square. Having done that, she questions how the scoundrel managed to disrupt her peace, as that home was her only relief when she returned tired from work, essentially her oasis from modern society, her private paradise. For ruining that, the executioner vows to end Slay. Slay orders the clay golem to retaliate, but the girl had anticipated his move to the point of slicing the monster in half effortlessly. After falling to the ground with the golem's collapse, Slay sees the executioner approaching and panics, while Alina lifts her hammer and asks if the man never learned not to break other people's things. Then she completes her attack move, causing a massive dust wave in the square, but the truth is, she struck next to Slay, not his body. Later, she laments alongside Silver Sword that her home was ruined along with all her peace, and she doesn't even know where she'll live tomorrow. Thus, the boy gathers all the courage he can muster and invites the woman to live with him. Alina thinks it's not the time for jokes, as it's obvious she'll stay in a hotel. But due to that unfortunate complainer, she'll have to work even more overtime. At night in the town square, an older man asks a woman if it was here that the executioner appeared, and she confirms it was. The man thinks they should thank the executioner for protecting Ifil, but insists his luck ran out as soon as he stepped here. With that, the man activates his Sigarth Chroma's ability. In the midst of this, Alina is doing what she hates most in life, which we already know by now. As she stays late at work, she complains that her house is gone and curses the complainer to the 5th generation of his line. Helping the girl at work, Silver Sword asks her to cheer up a bit. Then she remembers she already told him to leave, but he's still there. He argues it's better to stay close after everything that happened, so Alina reflects that this guy is high up in the guilds and has permission to enter the office, while he himself questions if it's enough for today. About this, the employee shares that she's been in this situation many times, wanting to leave the work for the next day, when she would have more energy, but one day realize that today's Alina will have to deal with tomorrow's lazy Alina, and the truth is she'll never feel motivated to do a damn bit of overtime. That is, the issue is to do everything on the strength of hatred, so that it's possible to leave on time the next day. Finally, after hearing the rant, the man submits the corrective forms in record time, surprising even Alina. She notices everything is correct and in order, so she wonders if the guy is one of those prodigies who get everything right on the first try with little guidance, while she's the typical clumsy one who makes every kind of mistake until she learns to do it right. Honestly, that kind of people really annoys the girl, as she always has to try her hardest to learn things, and this makes her shrink at the table and question, almost crying, why the world is so unfair. The boy responds that he could only do it because she's a good teacher, but not convinced, Alina laments that people are born into inequality. Thus, the guy stands up and claims he'll take care of everything else, but Alina continues crying and replies that her pride as a receptionist won't let her leave. To lighten the mood, he tries to grab a candy from his bag, but ends up pulling out the relic that Alina destroyed. Interestingly, it had mission order written on it, and the item emits a light detailing the objective. The location is the Tower of Chalk, where the bosses of each floor must be defeated. Silver Sword confesses he's never heard of this tower, and Alina agrees that it's all very mysterious, but all she wants is for the guy to take this weird thing home and deal with it himself. The next day, the girl reads in the newspaper another piece about the executioner, while her friend Layla celebrates that this unknown being is plastered everywhere and confesses she's crazy about him. Alina argues that no one knows what his face looks like, but the friend is sure the man behind the hood is a hunk. Honestly, she would love for him to hammer her with that huge hammer, especially considering that he fights alongside Dear Jade, the leader of Silver Sword and the most handsome tank in town. Later, while she was serving, Alina sees Glengarria, the guild boss, entering and telling everyone that the executioner has been causing trouble in the region. That said, he approaches the receptionist and asks how things are going. Trying to maintain control, she replies that everything is in order, then he asks if she knows what his ability is. Clover explains that it's Sigurth Chronos, capable of freezing time in a place and allowing the user to watch events that happened in the past. With that, the man laughs, while the woman reflects that this power may have given this guy the opportunity to see the executioner's face. Speaking of which, he approaches the guild employee's ear and invites her for a private conversation at the guild headquarters. Once there, the poor woman laments that she was discovered and will be fired, while Jade responds that the guild boss may seem strict, but is also understanding. Alina flips off the snitch, but he promises he didn't rat out the girl. Not believing it, the receptionist expresses her desire to see the boy stub his toe on a dresser and die. And that was it for him. Imagining that Jade is in love, Lululi was about to comment that he has no chance, but Lo covers her mouth before. After that, in the guild's training field, Glengarria summons Alina Clover and challenges her to a duel, knowing this woman is the executioner. If she loses, the girl will have to join the Silver Sword Guild. If she wins, the guild will leave her alone and ensure her job as a receptionist. Without a second thought, Alina conjures her war hammer, making Lo and Lululi realize once and for all that this woman truly is the executioner. Once the guild master decides to settle this dispute through violence, Alina doesn't hold back and charges at her rival, who responds by activating his Sigurth Chronos ability. With time frozen, he realizes that this girl is more than an executioner. She's also a divine beast or even a malevolent god. With that, Alina's hammer breaks through the time barrier imposed by Glengarria. As she does this, she looks around trying to grasp what happened. With everything around her paused, Glenn explains that this is his observation room, existing outside the normal flow of time. Only he should be able to move there, but his opponent has just shown that there's more to her than meets the eye. Chuckling, the guild master simply surrenders and cancels his ability. Even more confused, Alina demands to know what's going on, so Glenn takes her to the core to explain that he only challenged her to a duel to assess her abilities personally. A woman behind the master explains that abilities can be categorized as Regent type, Sigurth type, which are rarer, and Dia type, which are even more difficult to find, with a lower type only defeatable by a higher one. In other words, Alina must be a Dia type. Not interested in this discussion, Alina stands up, hoping these people will keep their word and not bother her anymore. But before she can leave, Glenn asks if she's heard of the Tower of Chalk. Alina inquires what that has to do with anything, and he reveals that he discovered this new dungeon when he started an investigation after receiving Jade's report. The mission report that emerged from that relic was a secret mission, hidden by the ancestors. Losing patience, Alina grabs the man by the collar and makes it clear that, to her, this only means an explosion of missions is coming and she's just going to have even more work. In summary, more overtime is on the way. Seeing the woman's dilemma, Glenn discovers that she only became the executioner to avoid more work, so he argues that the receptionist will be compensated for the mission. However, Alina complains that the guys said they would leave her alone, but they're already starting with this twisted talk of missions and so on. As she goes to leave, the master promises to double the number of receptionists at the if-full counter if Alina helps the Silver Sword in this expedition. Alina crosses her arms and considers the offer. After all, this means that finally there will be people to take over the amount of work at the guild, and she will no longer be overloaded and will be able to leave on time every day, her biggest princess dream. With that, she decides to help the guys out. After that, in the Silver Sword's lodging, Alina wakes up feeling strange as her home was destroyed, and she wakes up in this fancy, strange place with exquisite furniture and a bed the size of a boat. By the way, she takes advantage of the bed's quality to sleep a bit more, but someone knocks on her room door to fetch the poor thing. Sometime later, the group arrives at Elm Canyon, and the White Mage thinks it's a good time to introduce herself again as Lululi Ashford, the team's healer. Low Blender explains that he's a black mage who serves as a rear attacker. He attacks from a distance, while Alina handles the melee. Alina shows her work card and says she's on a formal employment contract with the government, while the leader of the Silver Sword calls his partners to set off. On the way, Lo comments that the receptionist seems fed up with being here, so Jade tells her she's giving up her vacations to be there, even though one day is very little, in his opinion. Hearing these words, Alina takes offense and replies that vacations are the worker's reward and her only full moment of rest, besides being the most precious universal right that exists. With that, she shakes the guy vigorously by the collar and makes him repeat that vacations are precious, while Lululi points to the Tower of Chalk ahead. Arriving there, Alina asks where the other adventurers are, and Jade responds that the guild is restricting access to this information, so only Class 1 licensees know about the existence of this dungeon. Before entering, the leader shows a relic that the guild designed especially for the silver sword, which serves as a guidance crystal, and every group member carries one. This relic is responsible for alerting when one of them is on the brink of death. Lo mentions that this thing is worth a lot if the girl wants to sell it. Then Luli hits him in the groin with her scepter and responds that this crystal is the symbol of the unity of the members of the Silver Sword. Finally, they enter the first floor, and Jade teaches Alina that the vanguard attacker never starts a combat, as it's the tank's job to attract the enemy first. By the way, a gigantic war wolf appears in front of the team, so Jade steps forward to conjure his Haster ability to attract the monster, followed by the Sigurth wall. The wolf attacks the tank but drops its guard when it stops at the shield. Then Alina gets the order to spring into action. At that moment, she leaps with her hammer and smashes the creature's skull in one blow. Then Lo concludes that he'll have little work for him today, while Lululi rushes towards the receptionist with great excitement and admits being impressed. Not knowing what to say, Alina tells the girl that she'll also be a great healer when she grows up. Then the mage frowns and tells her that she's older than Alina. As the adventure continues, the group discovers that the first floor has no boss, which is quite different from what they're used to. Because of this, Lo questions what the ancestors were thinking when building such a place, while Alina wonders if the builders of the labyrinth disappeared suddenly. Luli explains that this was due to the fury of Daya. The ancestors were in search of great power, and this enrages the gods, who decided to wipe them all out. On the second floor, Jade halted her walk upon hearing something, but started running when a scream came from the door ahead. Upon arrival, she found 3 men violently slain on the ground. The team's healer tried to restore their health, but to no avail. The ghastly state of the bodies reminded Alina of a similar moment in her childhood, prompting Jade to ask her companion to look away. Examining the corpses, the leader noticed that something had penetrated the tank's shield, killing him instantly. This was certainly not the work of any ordinary monster. Amidst this, they saw that Rufus, a guild member, was alive, so they hurriedly approached him. Rufus pointed to one side and mentioned that a humanoid monster had come from there and used a skill. Just then, a bat, attracted by the blood, swooped in, ready to attack Luli, but Alina intervened just in time and eliminated the threat. Rufus, startled, noticed that this was the executioner's hammer and accused Alina of being friends with the monster, as it also used a white magical circle to summon weapons. After making this accusation, Rufus even called the girl a monster. After the expedition concluded, Jade reported to the guild master that Rufus' group, which was second only to the Silver Sword in strength, stood no chance against this threat. Considering this, Glenn contemplated shutting down the Tower of Jizz, but the survivor himself entered and thought the two were cowards for wanting to cancel the conquest missions. Jade argued that the man had experienced the level of danger firsthand, but he retorted that nothing irritated him more than knowing Jade was in the Silver Sword, as he should have been in that group. Out of control, Rufus threatened to tell everyone that the executioner was a disguised monster, and if Jade didn't want that to happen, he would have to expel this creature from the group and return with him to the Tower of Jizz, as Rufus wanted the special relics found in the depths of that dungeon, which grant Daya abilities. Jade responded that he wouldn't risk his comrades' lives over unfounded rumors, but Rufus made it clear that he had no choice. Thus, the leader of the Silver Sword met with Alina to inform her that they would take Rufus to the Tower of Jizz, meaning the girl could go back to being a receptionist. Alina asked about the promise to double the contingent of receptionists at the guild, and when Jade replied that the master would do what he could, she realized something very strange was going on, but as it had nothing to do with her, she excused herself to pack her bags. At that moment, Jade noted that she wasn't wearing her uniform today, to which she replied that she wasn't a slave to wear a uniform even on vacation. With that, the man remarked that he was lucky to see her in casual clothes, causing Alina to blush and tell him to leave once and for all. However, before he actually left, she asked if the group would really be okay, given that the monster had a Daya ability. Jade answered that, well or not, orders were orders, and that's how the Silver Sword operated. Still, he promised that everyone would return alive, then opened the door to leave. This movement allowed Alina to see another man in the adventurer's place, disturbing the girl's mind. At this point, we are thrown into an old memory of hers from a day spent with this man, her Uncle Shroud. After serving him a drink at the tavern, she wanted to know how the dungeon adventure went because her dream was to become an adventurer when she grew up. Shroud said it was better to have a safe job as a receptionist than to get involved in that kind of danger, but the girl slammed her hand on the table and insisted she wanted to go on missions with her uncle. Moreover, she raised her pinky for the two to make a promise, and the man responded to the gesture to seal the deal, as he was a man of his word. One day, Alina suffered the trauma of seeing her uncle dead in front of her, covered only by a sheet. She knelt down and urged the man to wake up, recalling the promise they made, but seeing that Shroud did not rise, the child began to cry desperately, while holding his injured hand. Waking up sad, Alina realized it had been a long time since she had dreamed of this. After putting on her uniform, she looked at herself in the mirror and thought that today was the day to return to the usual routine of overtime. Soon, she held the silver sword relic and hoped everyone would return alive. In the Tower of Jizz, Lululi approached Jade to emphasize that he was activating the Sigurth beast all the time and that it was better to take a break. Exhausted and dripping with sweat, the leader assured her it was fine as he needed to do this to keep the group from encountering the humanoid monster. Rufus scorned this ability of the tank, then Lululi asked ironically who was responsible for forcing them to come there. In any case, the group leader asked for calm and they continued on their way. On the 4th floor, Jade opened a door and drew his sword upon smelling blood. Instantly, Lo summoned a glow near the ceiling, illuminating the corpse of a monster that fell from above and formed an individual. This individual claimed not to be a monster, not today at least. In fact, he was Silaha, the evil god. With that, he invoked the Dia Storm, forcing Jade to quickly activate the Sigurth wall to protect his comrades. The god praised the man's reflexes and said this would be fun, while Lo thought it best for them to beat a retreat. However, Rufus surprised everyone by activating the Sigurth prisoner ability, trapping all members of the Silver Sword. Upon doing this, he said that this evil god was sealed in this place, and according to what he had heard, the seal would only be broken when Scylla had consumed enough souls. In light of the revelation, Jade asked if Rufus was the one who killed his teammates, and he admitted that he had done so to revive this god. Speaking of which, Scylla would kill the members of the Silver Sword at that moment, and Rufus would gain his own Dia ability from it. However, Scylla surprised Rufus, who was busy laughing proudly, and stabbed his spear into the human's back. The human asked why, and the god justified that all those who crossed his path were devoured, without exception. When the user of the magical prison died, the spell was nullified. Rufus' soul rose to the top and was consumed by the evil god, who tasted the vulgarity and pettiness of that man. By the way, now was the time to know the taste of the other humans in the room, so Scylla pointed his weapon at them. Meanwhile, Alina is doing her usual work with a smile on her face, but inwardly, she's worried about her comrades from the Silver Sword, despite the circumstances. Remembering Jade's words, he had said that even if they can't defeat this enemy, they need to follow the orders they were given. Trying to shake off this concern, the girl tucks away her group's necklace and shakes her head. Back at the Giz Tower, the team members wonder what to do as the evil god approaches after having knocked down the first human with ease. Jade, for example, knows his Sigurth abilities stand no chance against a deity wielding Dia-level powers. As the adventurers stand frozen, Scylla takes the first step to attack, but Lo quickly reacts with his Agnes magic. The god easily defends himself and questions what kind of joke this is, while Lululi activates the Immortal's blessing on the team's tank, who sees Scylla throw his spear at his shield, tearing a piece off. Moreover, the attack causes a wound on the young man's shoulder, which is quickly healed. Intrigued by this healing skill, Scylla vows to steal it for himself with his Dia Drain ability. Soon, he summons the giant god's envy mirror and positions it in front of Lululi. Jade tells her to run, but the mirror emits a powerful light that hits the healer, snatching away her scepter and tossing it into the god's hands, who breaks the staff in half without hesitation. Lululi tries to cast other spells but can't without her magical weapon. Amid this, Jade and Lo notice that Scylla has the Dia mark on his neck, meaning he's another relic created by the ancestors. Meanwhile, the evil god summons the Dia Judgment, levitating swords that aim directly at their opponents. Jade knows his companions will die instantly if hit by these blades, and he can't let them die in such a place. With this in mind, he tells his allies he will take the hit, while the rest must find an opening to escape. After declaring this, the tank personally challenges the adversary to a duel, making Scylla burst into laughter. To show he's serious, Jade conjures Sigurth blood, a skill that forces the opponent's attack to hit the user. Lululi remembers they had agreed to only use this technique along with the Sigurth resurrection, so she asks if the leader is planning to sacrifice himself. Then mercilessly, Scylla casts his judgment on the human, and the floating sword is hurled with all its weight, piercing Jade's shield and going through his belly. Still, the tank tells the enemy to keep attacking, because he's trained with Alina every day, so he can endure more than this. At the same time, he yells for Lo to run, but his ally can't flee and leave his friend behind. Scylla displays his sadism by confessing he's curious to see how much the young human can withstand, then throws another sword, which pierces his right thigh. Instantly, the warrior's leg loses strength, but Jade remains standing with the sword planted in the ground. Lululi despairs and runs after Jade, but Lo grabs her and carries her away on his shoulder. With their departure, Scylla questions if this is the end for the night, with his own comrades abandoning him. while Jade only thinks about buying enough time for his friends to escape, as this is his purpose as a tank. Silhouette admits the boy is quite resilient and that it will be pleasurable to devour him. In the meantime, Lo carries Lulu to a more remote location within the Giz Tower, but the healer doesn't forgive her partner for having abandoned the leader. Lo shouts back, asking what on earth they could have done there, especially since Jade insisted on sacrificing his life so they could escape. Gradually accepting the situation, the girl kneels and wonders if Jade will die, but before any answer, the pair hears thunderous footsteps in the tower corridor. Approaching is a quadruped monster of gigantic proportions, drooling and snorting, full of rage. When Lo positions himself in front of the group's healer, as the manual dictates, the beast pounces. At night, there is Alina once again staying late at work, this time alongside Layla, who can't stand to see another sheet of paper in front of her. But her colleague reminds her that if they finish all the work today, they can leave on time tomorrow. To endure the strain, Layla asks for some of Alina's favorite angel wing drink, and the two take a good swig. Layla loves it, but notes that it tastes like overtime drink. By the way, she starts crying when she remembers that the guild gave up on going after the executioner, as her dream was to see this hero join the Silver Sword. Changing the subject, the girl notices that her friend's pocket is glowing. Alina sees that it's the Silver Sword pendant, meaning some ally is on the brink of death. The receptionist is shocked by this news, as this event immediately reminds her of what happened to her uncle in her childhood. Struggling with these memories, she runs out without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, Scylla conjures several floating swords at once and laughs at the face of the human in front of him, although he confesses that he is quite interesting. In any case, all he wants to know is how many swords the shield bearer can take in his back. For his part, Jade imagines that this is where he will die, and the first person who comes to his mind is Alina Clover, because he kind of liked that grumpy face she makes, but if he said that, he would get a good hammering to learn to keep quiet. From the first time he saw her in the depths of that dungeon, the boy felt something for that girl. Analyzing her, Jade thinks Alina always acts mature, but in reality, she is much more childish than she thinks, always trying to solve her problems with violence. On the other hand, there's that lifeless look when she's working and the scary face when she's angry. All this, along with the joy on Alina's face when she leaves work on time, makes Jade just want to have more time to enjoy the things that are worth it in this life. By the way, the warrior yells that next to Alina Clover's warhammer, the attacks of the evil god Silha are absolutely nothing in comparison. Meanwhile, Alina runs desperately to the crystal portal at the guild matrix. As she approaches, the guard points his sword at her and asks what she is doing there at that hour. However, he soon realizes she is a guild receptionist and informs her that this portal only leads to dungeons, and if she wants to go to another city, she should use the Ifil portal. Unable to reveal her true identity, Alina thinks of something to say and reflects that adventurers are doomed to die as they choose a risky lifestyle and profession. Nevertheless, Alina chose another job precisely to avoid such fates, and she works hard to maintain a stable and safe life, yet it seems she's throwing all that away to get into trouble. After all, she has no obligation to save her supposed comrades from the Silver Sword. However, after all this reflection on not getting involved, she feels the magic stone lighting up again and instantly conjures her warhammer, revealing to the soldiers that she is the executioner. Now that there's no turning back, Alina swears she'll send anyone who doesn't get out of her way to the underworld. In the dungeon, Lo suffers serious injuries while fighting the creature, until he is thrown forcefully against the wall and shows no reaction. Lily runs towards her companion and cries because she can't heal him without her scepter. Still, the wizard tells her to flee while she can, but she refuses outright. The monster advances with all its crushing weight, so Lily decides to spread her arms as if to block the beast's path to her friend. Just then, Alina Clover arrives with her war hammer, landing a decisive blow on the monster's head and killing it instantly. After that, she hands Lo a bottle of angel wing, while Lulu pleads for the executioner to save Jade as soon as possible. Lo explains that their leader is facing the evil god Silhel alone, capable of devouring human souls with his ability Gaia. Thus, Alina advances through the Giz Tower and sees Jade severely wounded on the floor, possibly dead. At that moment, she remembers his promise that they would all return alive. With tears in her eyes, she begs the boy to wake up, but he does not respond. Then Scylla's spear flies across the hall and nearly hits the executioner, who escapes just in time. Seeing that the woman was able to evade his attack, the god assumes he will have another somewhat interesting duel. Thinking that Alina came to save the boy, he warns that it's already too late, but that they had quite a bit of fun until the end. Hearing these despicable words, Alina becomes furious and conjures her Dia Grinder to finish off the enemy. Filled with rage, she quickly advances against Silha and strikes him hard, which he blocks as much as he can but is thrown against a column in the hall from the powerful impact. After recovering, the god finds it curious that a human possesses power equivalent to his. Next, he invokes the Dia sentence, along with countless swords that hover in the air around Alina, just as they did before ending Jade's life. However, Alina manages to escape the blades, either dodging or deflecting them with her weapon, but two get her arm and belly one after the other, making her fall instantly. In excruciating pain, she tries to recover, but another blade appears at such speed that it would be end of Alina. However, the Sigurth wall is launched in time to repel the blade, saving Clover's life. It was Jade, who even severely weakened, managed to use his last power. While Scylla acknowledged that the boy is persistently stubborn, Alina takes advantage of the distraction to hit him squarely with a hammer, this time causing the hall column to fall on the evil god as he slams into it with all his weight. With this, Alina goes to Jade, who tells her that he could hear the chilling sounds of the warhammer strikes from Clover, and after hearing those noises, he knew he couldn't die because he isn't the type to die easily. Then the man embraces the woman tightly, and she gives the rest of her angel wing drink to her comrade, who is happy for the opportunity to kiss his crush by proxy. However, Scylla emerges from the rubble and seems surprised to have been wounded, but assures that it was not a defeat. That said, the god instantly heals his chest wound, and Jade tells her that this is the ability of Lululi that he stole. In other words, if they don't kill this guy in one blow, he will keep regenerating. Finally, Scylla emphasizes that Alina Clover possesses power equivalent to the beings who created him, but that's precisely why she has no chance of defeating him, because the very ancestors were decimated by the evil gods, and nature dictates that the weak must bow to the stronger. With the end of his speech, the god again invokes the Dia sentence, this time with even more swords. Jade wants to serve as a shield for Alina to escape, but the girl doesn't want to hear it and makes her way through the blades with her hammer until she approaches Scylla, but some swords hit her and make her fall. However, the girl promises that her friends won't die in this dump and that she will one day have her peaceful life, then attacks the evil god with a power aura around her body never seen before. Disbelieving the strength of that strike, Scylla recovers and repeats the Dia sentence, this time with 1,000 blades attacking Alina at once. Still, she manages to expel each enemy's sword and tear off the god's arm with a hammer blow. Having done this, she makes it clear that in her life of peace, there will never be a day when someone doesn't come home. With that promise in mind, the executioner delivers the final blow that defeats the one who conquered her ancestors. However, before dying definitively, Scylla mentions that there are other evil gods and that they will never have an end until Alina crushes him fatally without letting the god finish speaking, because according to the secretary, anyone who forces her to do overtime deserves to die. After the victory, the other members of the Silver Sword were happy to find their leader alive, and Jade gave all the credit for the triumph to Alina Clover. In turn, the girl complained about having to work even more overtime now, but upon reflection, she felt it was worth coming. On the following days, Lululi focused on healing the injured group members, while Alina, who thought she would be fired once discovered, was reassured by Glenn's promise that his sentinels would keep her role as the executioner a secret, allowing her to return to her normal life as a secretary. However, one thing that didn't change was the fact she still had to work overtime. On yet another night of pilot work, she complained again about the long hours, but now admitted that adventurers really do work hard. At that moment, Jade arrived, offering help with his arm in a sling, explaining that his energy was the result of the half-filled love potion that Alina had given him. Hearing this, Alina slapped him but accepted his help, wanting nothing more than to finish this thing and go home. The next day on her endless work journey, Alina manages to finish her tasks in time to close the guild by lunch, leaving her a few extra minutes to enjoy the cooked hamburger steak she brought. However, a carefree adventurer rushes in at that moment, claiming he made it just in time. He has an urgent mission to accept, which is why he hurried over. Moreover, he casually asks if it's okay to be a little late, since Alina is so nice, but inside, she just wishes this guy would meet a slow and painful end. After all, there are always two forces battling for attention within our minds, the little angel and the little devil, in a never-ending debate about what to do in such situations. To top it off, the adventurer asks the receptionist to hurry up because he still needs to go for lunch. This last remark makes Alina lose her cool for a second, but she quickly recovers her broad employee smile and assures him that she'll take care of his request. A few minutes later, Alina is seething as she eats her sandwich, unfortunately consumed by anger rather than enjoying the meal she had looked forward to. Concerned for her friend, Layla asks why Alina didn't just send the guy away, but if he had grumbled and stomped his feet. All she would have gotten was even more work. Besides, everything she is doing is to avoid piling up tasks until the much-anticipated Centennial Festival, which, although it lasts for 3 days, has seen Alina working so hard the last 2 years that she never even got a chance to attend. For this reason, no matter the sacrifice, she will do everything within her power to participate in the festival. Layla wonders if they'll be that busy, and Alina replies that the missions accepted during the festival will offer larger rewards than usual thanks to the special bonus period. By then, adventurers will swarm around the guild like crazed zombies in search of flesh. From there on, it's death. With that, Alina slams a book on the table. It's an extensive report based on her 2 years of experience, revealing all the mission acceptance trends. She also shows a schedule for the 3 days of the festival and a plan to make the most of everything. On the first 2 days, Alina plans to try all the foods, and on the third day comes the main event, a ceremony of resting souls. To achieve this privilege in life, all Alina Clover needs to do is give her all to avoid overtime. Seeing this peculiar scene, Layla comments that her friend is really into this stuff, while Alina reaffirms that nothing will stop her from enjoying this festival. Meanwhile, at the Silver Sword Inn, a person dressed in a pink bunny costume slowly approaches some plant pots and pulls the first one she sees. The plant screams desperately, but the girl in the bunny outfit doesn't care and takes it to a laboratory, where she uses it as material for an experiment. At the end of the experiment, Lululi successfully develops a colorful substance that is deposited into a glass jar, leaving her creator proud. Nearby, Lo practices his aim in his room, but despite not doing too badly with knife throwing, he feels he's still far from ideal. At that moment, Lululi arrives, outraged by the boy's pastime because he's injured and should be recovering, not acting recklessly and risking further injury since he fractured ribs and had a punctured lung. By the way, she gives the day's medicine to the boy. The appearance doesn't seem very appealing to the wizard, but the healer argues that even Jade has drunk it, so he just needs to gulp it down and keep quiet. Since he can't just run away from there, Lo accepts the challenge and swallows the strange substance, which provokes a bizarre reaction in him. Lululi laughs and asks if he's feeling better, and he admits that he does feel a bit more energized, even though the taste of the drink is pretty awful. Either way, the girl responds that she's there for that very reason, to make her companions better and take care of them whenever necessary. Back to the protagonist, Alina feels like she's in paradise for having managed to leave on time. One of the perks is catching the pastry shop open, so like a child, she approaches the display case and picks one of each sweet available, celebrating the fact that she is a productive worker who has the privilege of doing so. Then, as she points at a strawberry tart, someone else does the same at the exact same moment. In the next scene, Alina is enjoying a slice of chocolate cake just fine with a delicious topping of victory against overtime. On the other hand, Lululi is a bit embarrassed for having taken the last tart from the display, but the guild's receptionist insists that her friend should savor the sweet as if there were no tomorrow, and that there's no need to apologize for it. With that, the healer lets go and digs in, savoring it as if she had just tasted the nectar of the gods, the cure for all of society's ills, as the sugar slowly drips down her throat. Because of the extreme kindness of the local guild's employee, the healer comments that she understands why Jade is so smitten with her, and Alina chokes on this sudden remark. Changing the subject as if nothing significant had been said, Lululi asks if the woman usually comes to this pastry shop, and she responds that occasionally, since this place has the best sweets in Iful. Lululi agrees and mentions that Lo loves the grape jelly, and she came just to get peace for her friend. Alina responds that this is worthy of a good healer, but the pink-haired girl doesn't think it's that big of a deal, since they're all alive because of Alina Clover. Embarrassed, Alina asks the girl to drop it and just eat, lightening the mood again. Later, as the two say goodbye, the receptionist is surprised by Jade while walking home. He appeared out of nowhere and insisted on accompanying the girl to thank her for keeping Lululi company. Impatient, she asks if the kid was spying on her, and he replies that he was just surprised that Alina hadn't come to check on him. The girl asks why she would waste her precious time doing that, so the man explains that he's been feeling very lonely at the mansion since she left. On that note, Alina makes it clear that she prefers her own home, although she's grateful that the boarding house offered to cover the renovation. Annoyed, Jade argues that they faced death together, but Alina acts as if they were strangers, although she thinks they were just in the same place at the same time, nothing more. At night, Lululi walked through the streets, noticing the flags scattered about announcing the imminent arrival of the Centennial Festival. All she wants is to enjoy this celebration with her guild. Meanwhile, a man sneaked through the shadows of the alleys, watching the young adventurer's steps. With 10 days until the Centennial Festival, Alina promises to work like a convict, for the battle for the festival starts today. Seeing that her friend is fixated on this event, Layla asks if she's fallen for someone, since this festival has always been perfect for sparking romance. With a grim expression, her friend replies that she just wants to enjoy the event alone, so Layla grumbles that the place will be swarming with beautiful couples at every corner, while Alina risks her life wandering alone in a massive festival in the middle of the night for 3 days. Clearly, Layla did not expect such determination to get out on time just to enjoy the event in such a tacky and lonely manner. That said, the girl starts crying because she cannot accompany her best friend, since she will be accompanied by a handsome hunk who will be her date. Noticing that Alina doesn't care who this lucky guy is, Layla responds without being asked that she will be going out with the executioner himself. Alina's face drops in surprise at this last-minute bombshell, until Layla explains what's really going on. In fact, she personally created the executioner doll, combining the physical features she finds most appealing in a man, forming the perfect date for her imaginary and odd outing with a toy that looks like a criminal in a crop top. Remembering not to contradict a madman, Alina gets up to finish the cleaning, but a noise draws the attention of both. Outside the guild, an endless crowd of adventurers bumped into each other to see who could enter first. With the prelude to chaos knocking at the door, Alina drops the bucket of water from her hand as despair took over her soul. Many hours later, the poor girl was absolutely exhausted with a never-ending pile of work. Dead tired, Layla tries to understand where all these people came from, as it isn't even the bonus season yet. Realizing there's no other way, the protagonist decides to take drastic action to reverse the situation. Meanwhile, in some dungeon, a young adventurer named Cybele was making his debut for the Silver Sword on a training mission. Showing great agility, he advanced towards a giant werewolf and struck it squarely with his two-handed sword. The beast howled in pain from the wound in its chest, and the boy made sure to show his new companions that his work was well done. They all praised the rookie, but this distraction cost the team dearly. With his back to the adversary, Cybele suffers a harsh blow that causes massive damage. Luli rushes to help the comrade, but the sight of his burst chest brought back unwelcome memories in the healer's mind of other people in a similar condition to the fallen ally. Raising her shield to protect the team, Jade shouts his friend's name to snap her out of it. Then the young woman starts the healing process, but the tank is worried about the team members' hesitation. Upon recovery, Cybele stands up with hatred for the enemy and attacks again, but without a plan of action, provoking the ire of the Silver Sword leader, who orders him to fall back. Ignoring this, Cybele is disarmed in the fight and faces his death, but before a tragedy could occur, the executioner appears to prevent the worst. With just one strike, she splits the wolf in half, ending the fight in the blink of an eye. After that, the hologram dissolves and Alina drags Jade to another corner without saying a word to anyone. Wide-eyed, Cybele tries to digest the fact that the executioner defeated the werewolf with a single blow, making him question his worthiness of being in an elite clan like the Silver Sword. As the man completely loses his composure over this drama, Luli comments to Love that they'll have to find another companion. Meanwhile, Alina drags Jade to the office of Glengarria to complain that adventurers are already flooding her with requests. According to the guild master, there's an unfounded rumor spreading through the city involving a mission with a Dia-powered relic. Furious about this, Alina wants to know what to do to return to normalcy, and Jade explains that the guild will announce tomorrow that it was all fake news. Alina is sure that the brutish adventurers won't listen to that, so the tank raises his voice and says that since that's the case, they need to find out who spread the rumor, and meanwhile, all the girl should do is hold firm. Despite the confidence in the knight's voice as he uttered those words, Alina lowers her head and remembers that she still needs to finish today's work. After this meeting, Jade meets up with Luli and comments on her earlier hesitation in casting the healing spell. The girl excuses herself by saying she had never trained with a Longsword warrior before and the leader understands just fine. Lo arrives at that moment and adds that his partner must also be finding the new scepter strange, since that evil god destroyed the one she used to wield. For that very reason, the mage, along with the leader, want this gift for their friend. Then, Luli receives a bag, and upon unwrapping it, she lifts a scepter identical to the one she had before. According to Jade, they had it made to match. The girl is moved by the gift, but feels she doesn't deserve all this fuss. Her friends argue that she took care of them all these days, but the healer thinks that's just what she ought to do. Regardless, Jade responds that Luli's obvious actions were the salvation of their comrades, and for that, they are grateful. The following day, Alina was still working through lunch, which left Layla worried about the girl's obsession. Her friend advises her to slow down a bit to avoid looking like a robot, just moving from one paper to the next for review, but the protagonist doesn't like the idea, arguing that it feels like cheating. Layla points out that the only one benefiting from this speed is their boss, and Alina can't disagree. Later, at a meeting of the Silver Sword, Jade recalls that Rufus was obsessed with that Dia ability from the supposed relic of the Giz Tower, but the item didn't exist and the clan ended up reviving an evil god. Apparently, whoever spread this rumor wanted to be reborn as Silha. Considering that evil gods need to consume human souls to live again, this person spread the rumor to lure people to the dungeon to feed the god. Suddenly, Alina notices that all these crazy people are gathered and questions what the hell is going on. Glenn explains that they can't discuss these sensitive topics at the headquarters as someone might be listening, while Jade brings good news. The investigators have discovered the origin of the rumor. Regardless, Alina just wants this mess resolved quickly so she can enjoy the festival. That night, still at the company, Jade offers to help the receptionist with her work, provided she agrees to accompany him to the Centennial Festival. Although she initially refuses, the girl reflects that she won't be able to finish this darn work alone, no matter how hard she tries, so she reluctantly agrees to the warrior's proposal, but makes it clear she's doing so under duress. One way or another, what matters is that she's going to finish this backlog even if her life depends on it. 5 days before the Centennial Festival, Alina swore to take down the person who spread the rumor that on this secret mission, there exists a relic that grants a Dia ability. In fact, everyone who had made her work extra in this life would suffer the same fatal fate. Aside from that, she wondered why they were dressed this way, especially Lily, who looked like a walking armored shield. Jade replied that they were spreading the rumors on purpose for the novices, and Luli added that's why they were disguising themselves and waiting for these people to approach the group. Scanning the receptionist from head to toe, Jade noticed that Alina was disguised as a healer, and the girl asked if the big guy had lost something there. Lo reminded them that when you're a novice adventurer, even these clothes are enough to make you happy, as they're the concrete proof that you're really in the business. Further on, the Silver Sword reached the C-rank dungeon for novices, the Forest of Eternity. After some more walking, Jade led the others to the Mossy Rock Lake, a well-known resting spot among adventurers, where eyewitness accounts of the case were concentrated. Finally, the leader announced it was time to rest, and Luli finally threw her heavy shield on the ground to relieve her back. Alina sat down next to Jade, who took the opportunity to ask if the girl didn't find the river wonderful. He mentioned that many people play a game where they must swim to the mossy rock and then swim back. Before anything else, the woman made it clear she wasn't jumping in that river, and Jade was embarrassed, as that was exactly what he was going to suggest. Alina asked the guy to take the mission more seriously, and he replied that he was, but the Sigurth beast hadn't shown any signs of life yet. In the midst of this, the two heard the sound of their teammates swimming leisurely in the lake. Lo called Luli to swim with him, and when she refused, he splashed water in her face, sparking an instant fight that soon turned into playful banter as the healer took it sportingly. Meanwhile, all Jade could think about was Alina in a swimsuit that showed her true beauty, but knowing exactly what this kid was up to, the guild receptionist grabbed Jade by the shirt and flung him into the air, making the poor guy land almost on the other side of the lake. With nightfall, the team lit a campfire to spend the night, and Jade commented that it had been a long time since they had a chat like this. Lo remembered that the last time was during Lululi's special training. Alina asked what kind of different training that was, and if the Silver Sword only accepted the strongest adventurers. The team's healer replied that back then, her Sigurth abilities were just beginning to manifest just as the group members were still getting used to each other. Lo recalled that the healer would tremble with fear whenever a monster appeared, often causing her to trip over on the ground and have to heal herself. Luli complained that the two had agreed not to bring up that topic anymore, but Jade highlighted that the girl had become an extremely reliable healer now. Shyly, the girl replied that she just had some incredible skills. On the other hand, she considered her natural talent as null. About this, the leader assured that there was nothing to worry about as long as Luli kept doing what she felt was best for her, as it was working, and Lo added that she should feel confident about her work. In the midst of this dialogue, Jade heard a sound and went on alert. At that moment, when the footsteps of some men could be heard more clearly, the four raised their hoods. Then a group of armed men approached and asked if those present were also going to rest there. Jade replied that they were training to become stronger, and the leader of the other team introduced himself as Heights and stated that they also intended to rest in that space. Thus, everyone gathered around two campfires. Jade confessed that he wanted to take his group to a more lucrative dungeon, but so far it had not been very successful. Heights gave a friendly laugh and emphasized that he had the same problem when he started his career, then asked if Jade would like to become strong without training. The leader of the Silver Sword stressed that it sounded more like a fantasy, but the other man explained that it wasn't quite like that. For example, he mentioned the secret missions because according to him, if you accept one of these missions, a hidden dungeon will appear and you will gain a special relic, and it's this item that allows the manifestation of Dia abilities, the most powerful kind that exists. Having said that, Heights asked if Jade wanted this power, and pretending to be a novice, he replied that yes, of course. However, upon learning who was responsible for the rumors, Jade Scrade revealed his identity by pointing his sword at the other man's neck. Similarly, the other members of the Silver Sword subdued the others. Jade asked if Heights had encouraged Rufus to go after this Dia relic, but the guy claimed he didn't even know the person mentioned. Not satisfied, Jade insisted on answers, but a member of the enemy group lunged at him, forcing him to defend himself. The attacker confessed that he never imagined that important figures like Jade Scrade would be sent to investigate mere rumors, when suddenly, he was thrown with force into a nearby tree and was knocked unconscious. Then Alina appeared with her hammer and showed that it was she who had delivered the fatal blow. After all, she was not about to forgive these unfortunate gossip spreaders. Frightened, Heights questioned if he was facing the executor himself, and the guild receptionist replied that because of these guys, the Centennial Festival she so wanted to participate in was going down the drain like bathwater, therefore, everyone would pay the price. Jade shouted that they needed to capture the enemies alive, but Alina didn't care for this nonsense and advanced towards the rival group. However, Heights quickly conjures the Sigurth mover and teleports away with this ability. Nonetheless, the Silver Sword manages to capture one of them, and for some reason, Lululi recognizes him as Aiden, an old comrade of hers. By the way, Aiden wakes up and comments that it has been a long time since he last saw the healing lady, and she asks why he decided to spread those rumors. However, he responds that the story isn't false, but anyway, he wants to know who she thinks she is to address him in such a manner, especially being an assassin like Lululi is. Jade and Lo look at their companion, wanting to know what that's all about, while Aiden asserts that this girl is capable of abandoning her wounded comrades without a care. From there, Alina steps forward and asks that third-rate rat who cares about his twisted little tail, because what matters is that she's going to get revenge on all these gossips who crossed her path. Terrified, Aiden insists that it's important for them to know about Lululi's past, but the executioner tells him to shut it and brace for the hammer blow. With that, she swings her hammer at the man, causing a boom that makes the nearby birds flee. The next day, back to her usual work. Even after they discovered who was spreading the rumors, the guild was still packed with adventurers interested in this secret mission, forcing the poor receptionist to keep working like a mule. Speaking of which, Layla asks Jade what he's doing helping them, although she admits that the guy has a knack for it. The man replies that it's the toll he's paying to hang out with Alina at the festival, and Layla can't hide her joy at seeing her best friend finally hooking up. After all, she is pretty, but she doesn't have much patience for men. For instance, every guy who approaches her, she rejects with a rather dry smile. Jade wants to know what's this about Alina rejecting everyone, while Layla adds that her partner is finally going to quit this job to marry someone from the royalty. Alina makes it clear she would never marry that jerk, but Layla observes that it's Jade Scrade himself, a hotshot, brave guy who's in the elite of adventurers. However, having no patience for it, Alina stands up and makes it clear that there are joys in life that no money can buy, like a sweet treat after coming home from work or staying up late on the eve of a holiday. With that said, the last thing Alina wants is to depend on someone else to pay her way, especially since she has 2 arms and 2 legs, and they're not just for decoration. Seeing her friend like this, Layla asks why on earth the warrior fell for such a grumpy girl, but it's precisely that stubborn and wild side that won Alina the young man's heart. Sometime later, Alina is so tired of filling out paperwork that she decides to get some fresh air after letting Layla go home. When she leaves, Layla asks Jade how long her friend can last, but the man assures he will stay there with Alina to the end. Speaking of which, the girl emphasizes that Alina is a very kind person who always helps her with everything, including overtime, but she tends to take on all the responsibilities. With that, Layla hopes that Jade will help her friend with whatever is needed, and he says that's his intention. Finally, not wanting to be a third wheel to the couple, the girl takes off, leaving them behind. Alone, Jade ponders that he needs to become stronger. Meanwhile, in the guild's headquarters, in the Hall of Audiences, the leaders discuss the episode where the executioner eliminated the evil god Silha with Dia abilities, and they want to know who this person is. Summoned to this meeting, Glengarrier responds that he prefers to maintain the executioner's privacy as requested by him because he prefers to live a peaceful life away from wars. Back in the heart of the city, Lululi suffers from agitations during sleep. She's having a nightmare where she runs through a dark forest and is accused of being an assassin by Aiden's echoing voice in every corner of that place. As if that weren't enough, the healer bumps into Jade, who has a macabre expression, until his head detaches from his body and he falls to the ground. Observing the surroundings, the girl notices the bodies of her former comrades everywhere and lets out a scream of despair. At that moment, Lululi wakes up. The following morning, with 3 days left until the big event, she and Lo respond to a leader's call for dangerous training, clueless about what it means. Still bothered by yesterday's issue, Lululi questions if the comrade doesn't want to know the story of her being an assassin, but Lo doesn't want to since it makes no difference, and this surprises the girl. Soon, they arrive at the headquarters and Lululi decides to confess that Aiden was telling the truth, as he was the tank of the first group she was part of before her Sigurth ability awakened. One day, the team entered a boss room for the first time and the excitement among the members was notable, but everything started to go wrong from the start. Every minute, a comrade was knocked down. The Black Mage and the Swordsman were on the brink of death, but as she was very inexperienced, Lululi only had mana to heal one of the comrades, meaning she had to choose who to save. But since she couldn't decide, she chose to split her healing between the two, and that resulted in the death of both. About this, Lo explains that the friend might blame herself for not having had the ability to heal everyone at the time, but the tank also failed to protect the team, just as the attackers failed to kill the boss. Besides, if that's the case, even Lo himself is an assassin. Sogi asks if Lululi still wants to continue in the group. She says yes, because the boy would only do something like that if he had no other choice, and Lo takes the opportunity to say the same, especially since he trusts the Lululi he knows more than the words of any guy. After their conversation, the two made their way to Jade, who was suffering a severe energetic reaction until he collapsed on the ground. Later, at the Adventurers Guild research building, after recovering somewhat, the leader shared that he had been practicing simultaneous activation of abilities, combining Sigrith Wall with Sigrith Blood for a more potent result. Lululi scolded the boss, pointing out the dangers of such experiments until a woman named Shelly entered the room. Shelly approached Jade closely and explained that his reaction resulted from overusing his abilities, but fortunately, it had only reached the second stage. At the third stage, the patient would experience sensory perception changes and impaired reasoning. Beyond that, in more advanced stages, the options were a wheelchair or a coffin. Although Shelly was a researcher of abilities and relics, she wouldn't mind if Jade progressed to these stages so she could observe the effects more closely. Putting that aside, she revealed the heart of the evil god Silha, explaining that it was his core as the base of his body, and its darkened hue was due to it holding various mystical sigils or Daya abilities. Silha had demonstrated 3 of these techniques, but it seemed the souls he consumed granted him new powers. With a bizarre smile, Shelly remarked that such a god could indeed wipe out humanity. Finally, she informed them that she had investigated some rumor spreaders. The investigators said that a man hiding behind a black cloak and a mask had spread the rumor to them. The next day, on the eve of the Centennial Festival, Alina let out a cheer of celebration as she finished all her extra work at night. On one hand, she was happy because she could enjoy her favorite event, but Jade was anxious to spend time with her. Speaking of which, Alina Clover announced that after the overtime, there was only one response: to go out for drinks. Thus, the two headed to a tavern and enjoyed a date filled with food and drinks, the excitement clear in their eyes, each for their own reasons. Hours later, Alina passed out at the table after so many consecutive days of overtime. Jade called to his friend to head home, but the girl woke up tipsy and referred to him as Shroud, her uncle, exclaiming that he had finally returned. She told the imaginary uncle that she had become a receptionist and was eager to serve him at the guild. With that, the girl passed out again, and Jade was left pondering this man who seemed significant in his beloved's life, as it appeared she had been waiting for Shroud. Hey guys, the source will be in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos. See you.